My wife and I moved to Dubai. I was building a business. She was having an affair with a real estate developer. When I found out about the affair, I didn't make a scene. I just bought a share in his tower. Now she pays rent to me, and the investors have her letters. I remember when we first arrived in Dubai. The heat hit me like a wave as I stepped off the plane, but there was a spark in my chest, a fire. This was where everything was going to change. The city sprawled out before me. Endless possibilities, the skyline full of opportunities. I told myself this was the right choice, the only choice. We were here for the future. My wife, Clara, was by my side. She was always supportive, at least that's what I thought. It wasn't just the new city or the shiny offices. It was everything I had worked for. Years of late nights, failed attempts, sacrifices, all leading up to this moment. My fintech startup wasn't just an idea anymore. It was becoming a reality. But with that reality came an intensity I wasn't prepared for. I started working longer hours, much longer. I'd wake up at dawn, and by the time Clara finished breakfast, I was already back in front of my laptop, typing furiously, catching up on emails, talking to investors, developing code, organizing meetings, and fixing the thousand problems that came with launching a new business in a place as fast-paced as Dubai. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what I had imagined in my daydreams, but it was real. I hardly slept, living on caffeine and the pressure to succeed. And all the while, Clara would look at me, her face more and more distant with each passing day. She'd say she understood, that she was fine, but I could feel the silence between us growing. The conversations that once lasted for hours now dwindled to short exchanges over meals. Her eyes would look past me as if her mind was somewhere else. I tried to ignore it. I had no time for anything else. I had a dream to chase. But then the little comments started. At first they were nothing. Little jabs wrapped in concern. "You're always working. Don't you miss spending time with me?" she'd say while I buried myself in spreadsheets and meetings. At first I brushed it off. It was just her being emotional, needing attention. I told myself I'd make it up to her soon. After all, once the business took off, we'd be able to travel, enjoy the fruits of our labor. But it didn't feel like a simple plea for attention anymore. It felt like something was wrong, something deeper. She wasn't angry, she wasn't loud, but I could feel the distance growing. The coldness, almost imperceptible but always there. The texts she'd send became shorter, the phone calls with the same forced enthusiasm. I started coming home later, and she'd be in the living room, sitting alone, eyes fixed on her phone, not saying much when I entered. I tried to push past it, tell myself it was all in my head. But no matter how much I worked, no matter how many hours I poured into my startup, nothing felt right anymore. I began to notice the small things. She'd leave for the office later in the day, returning at odd hours, her smile less genuine. And I, too consumed in my own world, didn't ask the right questions. I didn't want to. I couldn't afford to stop. But one night it all changed. Clara came home late, her face pale, her eyes avoiding mine. She dropped her bag by the door, barely saying a word. I could feel it, the weight of something unsaid. "You okay?" I asked, looking up from my computer. She just shrugged, her eyes flickering with something unreadable. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice didn't match the words. It was flat, hollow. I set my laptop aside, deciding to push. "We haven't talked in days, Clara. What's going on?" She didn't look at me, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee mug. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter than usual. "I just feel lonely, like you're so far away from me." The words hit me like a slap. I froze. What was I supposed to say? I worked hard. I was building our future, our life here. Wasn't that enough? But before I could say anything, she stood up, her movement stiff, as if she couldn't wait to get away from me. "Maybe you should focus more on us," she said softly, before turning and heading into the other room. I sat there for a long time, the words swirling in my head. Lonely. How had we gotten here? I couldn't shake her words. Lonely. They haunted me. I'd never thought that word would ever apply to her. Clara had always been the one who was there, the steady presence beside me, supporting every decision, even the ones that seemed insane. We'd been through so much together. Why was she feeling this way now? At first, I told myself it was just a phase. Maybe the move to Dubai was harder on her than I realized. The loneliness of being in a new city, the isolation from our families and friends back home. I convinced myself that things would get better. I just had to work harder, push through, and soon everything would fall into place. I thought if I could hit the next milestone, get the next investment, make a deal, close a partnership, things would improve. I'd prove to her that the future we dreamed of was worth the sacrifice. But then it happened. I had been coming home later and later, drowning myself in work, when one night I got a call from one of my contacts. It was a developer, a guy I'd been talking to about possible expansion for the startup. He mentioned something that caught my attention, a new office building, one I had never heard of. It was strange. I asked him for more details, and when he mentioned the name of the business center, I froze. It was the same building Clara had rented an office for her project. I couldn't remember exactly when she had started renting the office. I had been so consumed with my own work that I hadn't questioned it. She'd told me it was for her passion project, something she was starting on the side. It was supposed to be a hobby, something to keep her occupied while I was working. She had been vague about the details and I didn't push, but now something didn't sit right. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the name of the building lingered in my mind, so I decided to look into it. The next morning I took the long route to the office, a route I didn't usually take. I drove past the building pretending to be lost in thought as I glanced up at the glass tower. I parked my car around the corner and walked into the lobby, trying to act like I belonged. And then I saw him. It wasn't the first time I had seen the man, but seeing him now, standing in front of the elevator, made my stomach twist. I had met him at a couple of business events, though I hadn't paid him much attention back then. His name was Samir, a successful local developer who had built a reputation for himself in the city. Tall, confident, always smiling. He had a certain charm about him, one that seemed to draw people in. And there he was, standing next to Clara in the lobby, talking to her, laughing. It was strange the way they interacted. Too comfortable, too familiar. I watched from a distance as Samir leaned in closer, and Clara's laugh, a little too soft, echoed across the space. My heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure what I was seeing, but I knew it wasn't right. I didn't confront her. Not then. I couldn't. I needed more answers. Something concrete. My mind was racing, but I kept calm. I took a mental note of the situation and left the building without them noticing me. The next few days were a blur. I spent the nights obsessing over what I had seen, replaying the scene over and over again in my mind. And then my suspicions began to grow, fueled by small clues, subtle things that Clara didn't even think to hide. The random late-night texts she would get, the way she would smile when she saw his name pop up on her phone. It was all starting to make sense now. She was distant not because of Dubai, not because of the stress of my work. She was distant because she had found someone else. I wasn't angry at first, just numb. I needed to know for sure. I needed to confront the truth. And so I did what any man in my situation would do. I started looking through her things. I wasn't proud of it, but it wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about getting back what was mine. My life, my future, my family. I needed the truth, and I was going to get it. One evening after Clara had gone to sleep, I sifted through her desk drawers. I knew she wouldn't be back for hours. She had a dinner meeting with clients. Among papers and receipts, I found a folder I hadn't seen before. It was labeled simply Project. Inside, there was an email exchange that stopped me dead in my tracks. Clara had been talking to Samir for months, long before she ever told me about her side project. There were emails detailing their meetings, their plans, their intimate conversations, complete with inside jokes and suggestions for spending time together outside of work. There it was, the undeniable truth. Clara wasn't just working with Samir. She was having an affair with him. I felt sick, a deep, gnawing sickness in my gut. The room spun, and I couldn't breathe for a moment. I had suspected something was off, but now it was clear. She had lied to me. She had betrayed me. And for what? For him? I put the folder down, my hands trembling. My mind raced, torn between anger and heartbreak. But one thing was clear. I couldn't let this go. Not now, not after everything I had sacrificed. She thought she could keep this hidden from me. She thought I wouldn't find out. But I had found out. And now I was going to make sure she never forgot the cost of her betrayal. The weight of the truth settled over me like a heavy stone, pressing down on my chest with every passing second. I couldn't believe it. Clara had been lying to me. The woman I had loved, the one I had sacrificed everything for, had been seeing someone else behind my back. I was drowning in a flood of emotions: anger, confusion, betrayal, but most of all, a cold, unwavering clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't confront her right away. I was beyond that. I had spent the last few months working myself into the ground for her, for us. But now I realized I had been a fool. I had built something so fragile, and she had chipped away at it with each lie, with each hidden moment, each stolen kiss with him. I sat in silence for hours, staring at the folder, at the proof of everything. A part of me wanted to confront her then and there, to scream, to break everything. But another part of me knew that wasn't how I would do this. No, if she thought she could play me, if she thought I wouldn't find out, then I was going to show her just how wrong she was. I needed to take control. I needed to show her what it meant to betray me. The next few days I stayed calm. I went to the office, kept up appearances, but every time I saw her, something inside me tightened. Her voice, her smile, none of it reached me anymore. She was just a stranger now, someone who had used me, and I was done pretending. I spent my days quietly laying the groundwork for what was to come. I reached out to one of my old contacts, a trusted lawyer, and arranged a discreet meeting. Over coffee, I explained everything, as unemotional as possible. I didn't need to explain the details of Clara's betrayal. I didn't need to justify my actions. All I needed was the legal advice to make this work. And then I made a decision. A big one. A bold one. I would invest in Samir's project, but I wouldn't just become an investor. I would become the investor. I would buy into his business, and through a trust, I would become co-owner of the very building where Clara had her office. The same office where she had been meeting him, laughing with him, betraying me. I did it all with surgical precision. I didn't let emotions cloud my judgment. I made sure everything was legal, above board. Clara would have no idea what was coming. She would never suspect that her husband was the one who owned the building now. A week later, I received the confirmation. I was officially a co-owner of the tower, Samir's tower, Clara's office building. But I wasn't done yet. I still had to execute my plan. One morning, Clara came into the office early, as she always did, and I watched her from across the room. She was radiant, almost gleaming with confidence, oblivious to what was about to unfold. I could see how she looked at me sometimes now, with a quiet disdain, like I was an inconvenience in her new life. But I wasn't her fool anymore. I wasn't the man who would chase her for attention or beg for her love. No, I was something else now. That afternoon, I had an email sent out to all the tenants of the building. The subject line was simple, clear, important update, payment issues. It wasn't until a few hours later that I got the call. Clara was on the other end of the line, her voice shaking, demanding to know why she had received a notice about non-payment for the office space. She sounded flustered, frantic. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice tight. "Why am I getting this email? I've been paying on time. I let her ramble, letting her squirm for a few moments. Then I calmly cut her off. "Clara, you've missed a payment. Your office space has been officially evicted due to non-payment. I'm afraid you'll need to vacate the premises." I could hear her sharp intake of breath, the silence that followed. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. "What? What do you mean? This doesn't make sense." I didn't let her finish. I didn't need to explain. She was going to learn the hard way. "I'm afraid it's all been processed," I said. "It's not personal, but you need to find another office space." My voice was steady, cold, unemotional. I hung up before she could respond. The following day, I took it one step further. I knew she'd be desperate, so I took the liberty of ensuring she wouldn't be able to find another office. I spoke to a few key people in the business community, made sure there were no available spaces for her in the area. Her project, her pride, would crumble. She would be left with nothing. And then just when she thought it couldn't get worse, I did what was the hardest part of all. I took her private emails and posted them in the community business chat. The emails, the ones where she vented about me, the dumb husband who didn't have enough ambition, who couldn't understand her needs. I posted every single one of them. The ones where she mocked me, ridiculed our life, our marriage, as if I was some foolish man who didn't deserve her. She thought I would never know. She thought she could get away with it. I didn't expect it to feel good. It didn't. But it was necessary. And then, the final step. Clara came home that evening, and she looked at me, her eyes wild with confusion and fury. She tried to hold it together, but it was clear she knew the walls were closing in. She didn't need to say a word. I could see it in her face. I looked at her, and for the first time in months, I felt nothing. No love, no anger, just a deep, empty coldness. You thought you could destroy me, I said, my voice as flat as the room between us. But you underestimated me. Her face turned pale as the words sank in, as she realized the full scope of what had happened. But there was no room for apologies now, no chance for reconciliation. Her world was falling apart. Mine had already fallen apart, and I was the one who had rebuilt it. The days after Clara left the apartment were strangely quiet. I didn't feel relief, though. Not the way I thought I would. I had won. I had executed my plan to perfection, but there was no sense of triumph, no satisfaction. Instead, there was a calmness, a stillness that hung in the air, almost as if I were standing outside myself, watching it all unfold like a spectator at a play. I didn't contact her after the eviction. I didn't need to. I didn't want to. I had done what I set out to do, and she was left with nothing. She tried reaching out through text a few times, but I ignored her messages. There was nothing left to say. I had made my point, and now she was a stranger to me, an echo of the past I had no interest in revisiting. I kept up my routine. I went to the office, kept working on my projects. The days passed without much change, but something in me had shifted. I was no longer the man who had poured everything into that relationship. I wasn't the man who had been too proud to question her, to challenge her. I was someone new, stronger, colder, more aware of my own worth. I didn't need her anymore. I had proven that to myself. Weeks went by before I received the call. It was from Samir. "Can we meet?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. I could hear the uncertainty beneath his words. I agreed, telling him I'd be available the next day. When we sat down at a cafe, Samir didn't waste time. He seemed almost uncomfortable, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. "I know what you did," he said, leaning forward. "The building, the evictions, the emails." He paused, looking over his shoulder, as if he were afraid someone might be listening. "Clara, she's been going through hell." I could hear the sympathy in his voice, but it didn't bother me. I wasn't here to listen to his justification for her. She had made her choices, and so had I. "You've made your point," Samir continued, "but I want to know why. Why go to all this trouble?" I sipped my coffee, letting the silence between us stretch. I could see the questions in his eyes, the uncertainty about my motives. But I wasn't going to explain myself. "Because," I said finally, "I was the one who built this. Not her. I put in the hours, the sweat, the sacrifices. She thought she could take it all. But in the end, it was all mine." Samir nodded slowly. He seemed to understand. He wasn't asking anymore, just listening. "I know what you did to her," he said again, more quietly this time. "But what about you? Are you satisfied with this?" I stared at him, my eyes cold. I wasn't sure if he was trying to provoke me or if he genuinely cared. Either way, I wasn't interested in playing games. "I'm not doing this for satisfaction," I said. "I'm doing it because she thought she could take everything from me, and now she's got nothing. The same way I was left with nothing when she betrayed me. It's about balance, justice, and I made sure it was clean. No mess, no public drama, no accusations. Just a slow, cold destruction of everything she thought she had. Samir leaned back, his fingers tapping the edge of his coffee cup. He seemed deep in thought, and I knew what was coming. She's not going to give up, he said finally. She'll fight back. You know she will. She'll try to take everything from you in return. I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't a smile of amusement. It was something colder, more detached. If she tries, I said slowly, she'll lose. She always loses. She never had control. She was never in charge. Not really. She was just a pawn in a game she didn't understand. Samir studied me for a long moment, and I could see the faint realization flicker in his eyes. He knew I wasn't the man who would back down. He knew I had already won. A few days later, Clara showed up at my office. Her face was pale, her hair unkempt, but there was a fire in her eyes. She was desperate, but it was too late. She had burned every bridge between us. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice shaking. Please, I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But this, all of this, it wasn't supposed to happen. I never wanted any of this. I thought I could fix things. I didn't say anything. I just watched her, her words bouncing off me like water against stone. You think I care? I asked, my voice low, unfeeling. You think I'm going to listen to you after everything you've done? Her eyes welled up with tears, but there was no sympathy in me, no compassion. She had used me for too long, and now she was crying for a chance to salvage her pride. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. I don't want your apology, I said, standing up. I don't need it. You've already taken everything you can from me. I've got nothing left for you. She stared at me for a moment, trying to find something in my face, some sign that I still cared. But there was nothing. Goodbye, Clara, I said, my voice final. And just like that, I turned and walked away. There would be no more talking, no more explanations, no more regrets. In the end, I was free. Not because I had destroyed her, but because I had rebuilt myself from the ashes of what we had been. I wasn't the man she had left behind. I wasn't the fool who had believed in her lies. I was the man who had learned to stand tall, with nothing but my own strength to rely on. And that was all I needed.